Everything should be cool. Everybody cool?
Are we recording now?
We are recording now, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Just be cool. Everybody be cool. Nothing bad needs to happen just yet. Who knows in the future. All right, let's start in 3, 2, 1. Let's go. Good evening, everybody. The website's URL is finalfantasy.fandom.com, and we are the finalfantasy.fandom.com podcast. Hello, my name's BlueHighwind, and I'm your host for tonight, as I am for most nights. Joining me tonight are these three people who want to introduce themselves, I assume.
This is Catuse.
I'm SomeColorMage.
This is Technobliterator, who is very proud of our host for actually getting the website name right. I'm very proud of you, dude.
Yes.
This is great character development right here. You've gone from not knowing the name of your own website to knowing it perfectly with no corrections. Congratulations, my dude.
Yeah, I may have had to have the website open in a tab on Firefox to double check that I was reading it correctly, but as long as it's done successfully...
Don't need to know that. They don't need to know that.
Yes, they do need to know that. They need to know what a ramshackle operation it is. I'm very proud of my own incompetence for some reason.
Alright.
Look, it's okay. Techno's so dedicated to this bit. He kept it even after we lost the first attempt at this. So.
Exactly,
Okay,
man.
all right, that's a level of incompetence I didn't want people to know about.
The viewers didn't need to know that.
Listeners, there's no audio. I mean, there's no video.
The listeners don't need to know that. See, we're very transparent, even when we shouldn't be. That's what makes us such a great show.
Yes, it's what makes us the
Anyways,
greatest Final Fantasy Wiki podcast on Earth.
We're
No.
also the only
This
Final
past
Fantasy
minute's
Wiki
just going to be
podcast.
mysteriously bleeped out.
Yeah. Okay, so where do we want to start? We have various nexes of info and importance that we could go to start things off. I think we should start with a little new video game that has come out, one that has joined us in our beautiful Final Fantasy family, and that is what is known as Final Fantasy VII The First Soldier, which got released, November 10th? Was it?
Yeah, so this is the Battle Royale game that's set in the Final Fantasy VII universe. There's apparently a good amount of cosmetics and things that people like about it, but as far as I can tell, it's just a little Battle Royale set in the Final Fantasy VII world that's competent. But if you don't like Battle Royales, which I don't, then you won't like this game. That's what I can tell.
You've stolen my thunder. That's my thoughts exactly.
Okay.
I actually did play it as promised. I told people on the air that I would play Final Fantasy VII The First Soldier one time. And I played one time. I'm going to go and give everyone the play-by-play of this epic adventure I had as BlueHighwind, the one-time soldier in The First Soldier. So, BlueHighwind, she's a blue-haired girl, because I just felt like being like that. She decided to parachute immediately. And various other people also had that same idea. So what she did is she saw the first guy and immediately raced right at him and beat him over the head. And that dude dropped dead.
Nice.
Meanwhile, somebody else was smarter than BlueHighwind was, and they picked up a gun and started shooting at BlueHighwind, who tried to run into a cargo container and then sadly died trying to heal herself of a potion. So, that is the end of my campaign with Final Fantasy VII The First Soldier. It was 36 seconds long, with a kill-death ratio of 1.
Good stuff.
Is everyone proud of me?
I'm proud of you.
It's okay, Blue. You will be the first soldier in our hearts.
Yes. I can't say I much enjoyed any of it. You know what? You're playing a first... you're playing a third-person shooter on a phone. I did have to play like 20 minutes of a demo level where you just play PC, and for some reason where they put the bullets, like where you shoot, is right where you turn the camera. So multiple points, I thought I heard someone shooting at me, and it was just my own dumb self accidentally hitting the shoot button.
That's the thing. Is like, I think I have, at least me personally, I have definitely underestimated the extent to which battle royales are now being played on mobile devices. Like, you see, like, people download Fortnite and whatever on their little iPads, and it's just like, okay, well, I mean, I guess it's working for a certain demographic of people, but I couldn't understand playing like a shooter game on. I mean, I don't play shooters in general, but I couldn't imagine playing it on a touchscreen where there's no feedback when you press the button. Like, that's what people always used to say, like, when first-person shooters came out. They're like, oh, how could you ever play this on a console? Like, there's no mouse. And, of course, until GoldenEye kind of turned that around. But, like, you know, it's just, I don't understand this form factor being used for shooters. But for whatever reason, Square Enix have decided this is the only form factor we want our Battle Royale to be on. You know, it seems like an interesting choice.
You know, it's a mobile-only game. Yes?
Yeah, it's a bit weird that it's mobile-only, especially as the First Soldier does have native controller support baked in. So, yeah, it should be possible to just port to fucking whatever. But overall, yes, the mobile market is actually the big one. That was one of the big factors in Epic and Apple's legal spat. It's that Fortnite on iOS is their biggest moneymaker.
It's huge. Yeah, I just completely underestimated it. Because to me, whenever I heard of people saying like, yo, I'm playing Fortnite, I always thought, oh, you're playing it on your PS4 or whatever. I've just never really encountered people playing it on mobile, but it's huge on mobile.
It's massive there. I never played it. I never will, because it doesn't have Final Fantasy VII in it.
Fortnite, but I played Apex Legends with a couple of my friends, and I had the same experience as Blue did. Each time I died immediately before ever picking up a weapon. And then I think the one time I picked up a weapon, I killed maybe like 2 people, and then I died. Hey, I suck at these games, man. I cannot play these games. I'm not good at them.
As long as your KD ratio is an integer, you're doing fine.
There you go.
Yep. As long as it's at least 1. What's interesting to me is that they have the native, controller support, because it seems like what happens is the people who have controllers hook them up to their phones and just, they have a controller, so they just go pew 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 and kill everybody, and then the people without controllers, they just get steamrolled. So I don't know what to make of that.
Yeah, it's like there's always like a hardware advantage
I don't know about that.
In certain players when it's a multiplayer game.
I bet there is.
That just seems weird to me.
I bet there's a 12-year-old who has been playing Fortnite on his phone for the last 5 years or whatever it's been, and he's better at that than I have ever been at any shooter in my entire life.
It wouldn't surprise me if that's the case, but I mean, I don't know. It just seems so weird to me to have this massive hardware advantage over certain players. I mean, hardware advantages have kind of always existed. Like, if you look at PC gaming, my computer is slower than yours, so I'm worse at the game. Those have always existed to an extent, but a controller seems a huge step up over just a touchscreen.
The controls are okay.
I don't know how well Square Enix has pulled it off, but it is certainly possible to allow less I mean, mobile controls aren't really unconventional anymore, but it is possible to have these control schemes that don't seem like conventional KBM or controller to work just fine. Just look at Splatoon. That is a game series that has at least partially defined itself on the fact that gyro aiming, and that's worked just fine for it, even if it's less prominent in the sequels just because of the shift from Wii U to Switch. But yeah, I don't think. While there is some level of degree in which the best, particularly.
Hello?
Will be able to steamroll pretty much anything else when it comes to conflicting control schemes. It is possible to make these work well.
Yeah. One thing I will say about the overall presentation of this thing is that it's competent enough. You're playing in like what looks like Midgard before they built the giant pizza over it. There's some level of plot to this thing where they're trying to say this is the early soldier program, and there's an opening cinematic that seems to be built into the whole soldier pride thing from Crisis Core, which I always found to be a little bullshit because you're a mercenary for a friggin' power plant. I mean, come on.
Well,
there's no honor in being the mercenary for Exxon going and killing people in, Zimbabwe.
You're not a mercenary, you're an employee. Technically, you're an employee if you only work for them. Mercenaries are freelance.
Okay, whatever it is, you are going out and you're killing people for BP. All right.
Yeah.
You're setting fires to villages in Mexico for oil. That's what you're doing in this game. That is what the soldier pride is. But other than that, there's really
anything.
But that's the thing. I think the soldier pride thing is supposed to be bullshit. I think it's supposed to be that you're doing this for some great reason or whatever. But actually, you're working for this evil mega corporation to make them richer. So I think I think the fact that you had that reaction to it is kind of the intended reaction.
I don't know. I played Crisis Core. They were playing it pretty straight. Yes, Catuse?
Why would you make a battle royale whose whole motivation is based around, something that's supposed to be satirical? It just doesn't. The story just sounds kind of incoherent.
There really is no
I've not
story.
played First Soldier, so maybe I'm bullshit.
As I was going to say,
that seems a lot better.
Yeah, there's the opening cinematic, and that looked like all there was because I didn't touch all that far in it. There's going to be seasons. You could play as someone dressed like Tifa. I guess maybe there'll be something like a background story to it, but I don't know what level of canonicity this thing has or how important it is. I imagine we'll never mention it ever again on this podcast, as a matter of fact.
I think it's canon, but like you said, it's not it's not gonna be what's it called? I can't remember the name of the Kingdom Hearts mobile game, but it's not gonna be like that. Where, that's the one. It's not gonna be on the level of Union X, where it's it's integral to the plot of the whole series. And if you didn't play it, then you'll be missing out or whatever. But yeah, I agree with you that I think it's very unlikely we'll mention it to a large capacity in the future.
It's not for us. It's simply how we should put it. It's for somebody else.
Yeah.
And that's fine.
All that I've really seen of this game is that one screenshot that I retweeted on my account. Is someone's character that's just looks like an Aerith cosplayer holding a gun, and I'm pretty sure that's enough. That's all I really need to see of this.
Yeah. I guess for something that is for us would be Final Fantasy V Pixel Remaster, which also released this month.
Yes.
I
have played this.
Yep.
I am enjoying the hell out of it, and I am willing to answer any questions that anyone has for me.
Okay.
AMA.
All right, so Bart, what's his true?
The best Final Fantasy.
Sorry.
Okay, so we just had a random guess ask us. So a phantom in the middle of nowhere asked us, why is Final Fantasy V the best Final Fantasy? To which my answer to that question will be, I think you're missing a number there. You're missing one. I'm afraid the best is Final Fantasy VI, but Final Fantasy V is a very good contender.
Okay, my question for you is Krill, Faris, or Lena? Who is the true pairing with Bart?
I don't do shipping in this game, dude.
We gotta
I
start
don't even do it for Final Fantasy VII. But not Cryo. Not Cryo.
Not Krill?
I'm pretty sure she's not. I don't think she's even of age.
Okay.
Lena, maybe I can see Lena having more chemistry with bots than I can with Faris, who Faris has I mean, she gets on well with her sister, I guess, but for the most part, you know, she's in her own little world, doing her own little pirate things. But I guess I'd ship Bartz and Lena, even if I don't really like shipping.
Okay. You got it wrong, because the one true pairing is Bartz times Boko.
Okay.
I'm just going to agree with Hexed's post in the Discord channel. It's Gilgamesh. It's Bart's Gilgamesh.
Yes, that is correct.
Oh,
Bartz and Gilgamesh is the best pairing in this game. Like,
You know, I think Bartz and Gilgamesh is the correct answer. And you know, if Final Fantasy V came out today, it would be an anime called something like.
It already made a Final Fantasy V anime.
Yeah, they did. It's the Legend of the Glowing Crystal Butts.
That's
but
right.
That was back when
course.
anime was just like kind of strange and not just like terrible harem anime.
Right.
If Final Fantasy V came out today, it would be a terrible harem anime. A harem isekai anime, actually.
So my answer, I didn't say Gilgamesh because Gilgamesh wasn't one of my options. You didn't give me that option. You only gave me those three.
You could have picked up your own nonsense. I decided the Chocobo was the true pairing. Even I broke out of the parameters I set to annoy you.
All right. So anyway, Final Fantasy V Pixel Remaster. I love it. I think it's the best way to play this game right now, and I would say that the soundtrack. There's like maybe 2 or 3 songs where I'm like, what the fuck, dude? This is worse than the original. But the rest of it is just incredible. I think they did a very good job with the soundtrack. I think there's literally there's only like 2 or 3 choices where I don't understand why they made that choice. But like everything else is like just remastered to just like exactly how you would imagine it sounding if it wasn't stuck with the SNES sound palette. But yeah, they do an incredible job with the soundtrack of this game. So I'm very happy with it. I think the presentation's good. Like, I think this is the best way to play this game.
I'm surprised there's so much horns in the soundtrack. It's Final Fantasy V goes to Hoenn.
Yeah, there is a lot of trumpets in this soundtrack. That's true.
Yeah.
And then. But then there was like again one of the few choices that I found kind of weird about it was like there was one bit in like I think it was like the decisive battle where there's like a part of the soundtrack where they use a woodwind instrument and it sounds all like ominous kind of thing. Yeah, but then they replaced it with a synth in this. I'm like, and it just ruins that. I'm just like, what?
I'm confused. So on the Super Nintendo, they used something that sounded like a woodwind instrument.
Yes, that's right. They used something that sounded like a woodwind for this one little bit of the decisive battle. And then they replaced that with a synthesizer. And I don't think the synthesizer fits at all.
Okay.
Which is kind of weird.
All right. How deep are you in Final Fantasy V?
So I have just finished Bartz's World. The reason I'm so slow is because I'm also doing a ton of stuff for the wiki on Final Fantasy V as well, and that's kind of slowing me down a bit, but loving it so far. It's been my favorite playthrough of the game thus far because I think I understand the job system a lot better now than I did when I first played it. So yeah,
that's cool.
Very, very good game. Highly recommend it.
Best job?
Best job is still the monk.
Really?
Monk is always the best job in any game it's in. But in Final Fantasy V, I love Monk because I just really love counterattack. Like I just love the idea that like an enemy hits you and then you hit them back immediately and then the enemy is responsible for its own death. Like so it's like my favorite thing to do is whenever it's viable to just put a whole party of just monks and then just slaughter the enemy team because you have damage output that's way above what they can handle yet, because it gives you, they have the best they have the best HP and the best strength, and because they learned the chakra ability, like they can heal themselves. So I think monks are the best. That's my favorite. I really like Mystic Knight. I really like Ninja. and I really like Dragoon. I love those jobs as well, but Monk is always going to be my favorite.
I was about to say, let the record hold that Technobliterator is completely wrong. The best job is Mystic Knight by about a mile.
Oh yeah, Mystic Knight is like Mystic Knight breaks the game in half, straight up. Like,
awesome.
Especially Mystic Knight and Ranger, and Ninja.
Oh, because Ranger has barrage in that game.
Ranger has rapid fire.
Yeah,
that's the only good thing Ranger has. Like, I mean, the bows are okay, I guess, but for the most part, like you're mastering Ranger to learn rapid fire, and then you're done with the job.
Yeah. Anyone else have Final Fantasy V thoughts?
Yeah, I haven't really been able to play much of the game, so I don't really have much hands-on. What is noticeable, however, is that this release has been very glitchy. Actually, like the most recent patch notes for this one. The bug fix list, I'm pretty sure, is about as long as the bug fix list of the previous 4 Pixel remasters combined.
Interesting.
So in terms of that, like, what I'll say to that is, I didn't personally notice them, but that's because I only got up to Bartz's world. What I will say is, like, I have known a couple people who played through it, and they would send me screenshots like, oh, this isn't right. But I feel like the reason why the bug fix is so long isn't necessarily just because this is like, a worst port or whatever. I think a large part of that is just because Final Fantasy V has much more complex mechanics than any game before it. Like, the mechanics of Final Fantasy V are just way more... They're just way more complex than definitely any of the NES games, but... Also, Final Fantasy IV is a really simplistic game.
I'm sorry,
that's because you have ability.
What glitches are there that's happening?
Are you asking me or asking him?
Anyone, yeah. I don't know what the glitches are. I haven't heard about that at all. I'm curious.
So, there was a glitch in here. Like, so a friend of mine sent me a glitch where they had just done Libra on an enemy that should be dead, and it turns out they were right, it should be dead, because it said HB 0 out of 1999, and it's like, what?
Huh. Is there anything else?
That's one of the... Yeah, that glitch was one of the big ones where if, like, part of the process of execution of a turn was interrupted, the enemy wouldn't die even if they'd already taken enough damage to. A lot of it is here's one of the other big ones. The gold hairpin, the MP reducing equipment, didn't work correctly. The MP cost was correct, but you actually needed to have the full MP for the spell to cast it, even if the cost was halved. All right. The zombie status effect just completely broke in a couple of cases.
That feels like we're back in the Super Nintendo era somehow.
It was possible to just completely skip Necrophobe. He just wouldn't spawn, and the save point he drops was already there.
Right.
What else is here? Like, here's the list. Things went slowly when you used Beastmaster abilities too much. Also, sometimes released the wrong monster.
Huh. So, like, when Final Fantasy VI comes out, are we gonna have like the M block problem back?
I wouldn't be. So the thing with
a
Final
simple
Fantasy
game,
VI,
so.
Hi, Hex.
the thing with Final
6 is a lot simpler than 5, but also it was the original version of 6 was a hell of a lot glitchier than any version of 5, including this one. So yes, if we are truly remastering 6, we need to remaster all the weird bugs.
I was gonna say, firstly, agreed with that about the fact that there's so many bugs in Final Fantasy VI that it almost feels like you can't really have a faithful remaster of the game that isn't also faithful to the millions of game-breaking bugs that were in that one, like the fact that you can cast 2 spells on any enemy and just kill them. And that's they obviously fixed it with the GBA version, but that was a bug. But
no,
the thing
Vanish
is, like,
Doom is kind of in that version.
Yeah, Vanish Doom, that's the one. But
Yeah.
I don't know that I would call 6 a necessarily less complex game than 5, just because, like, you know, I've been going through all the stuff in Final Fantasy V, and I'm going through all the abilities and things like that. And a lot of the abilities that were introduced in 5 are still present in 6. A lot of those mechanics are still there. They're just found in different forms. Like, so instead of equipping a job that will teach you something, you just equip a relic that gives you the same thing. Or like, so a lot of the mechanics are still kind of in there. Obviously, 6 is a simpler game to beat, just because it's like the difficulty of that game is so much lower than 5, and like the complexity in terms of what it expects of you as a player is a lot lower. But in terms of mechanically what's in the game, I would say they're like at similar levels at least.
A lot of the mechanics are there, but just due to the way various things are set up, there's less of a combinatorial explosion in the game. So there's less weird edge cases that someone might not have actually considered was even remotely possible.
Right, it's like, instead of being able to, like, there's obviously no Spellblade, for instance, but what you could do instead is you could give Locke the relic that lets him dual wield and the relic that gives him the barrage ability, and equip him with a weapon that has Fireblade in it. So he could effectively do the same thing as Spellblade, dual wield, rapid fire. Within Locke's skill set, it's a weirder way to accomplish that, if that makes sense.
Something interesting I've just discovered is that I went on the list of glitches and bugs of Final Fantasy VI on our wiki, and apparently we maintain a database of like patches to like fix the FF6 SNES version.
What do you mean patches?
Like
the
like people made bug fix patches for the Final Fantasy VI for the SNES, and we maintain a list of them, I guess.
Oh, so these are like mods
want to play
or
Final
something.
Fantasy VI on the SNES in 2021.
Yeah,
if you're modding your emulated copy, I guess these are the fixes that are out.
that's right. The Final Fantasy VI has an enormous ROM hack community.
Yeah, there's the infamous Pony ROM hack, which I heard somebody made for some reason.
Which is one of our own admins made that.
Yes. Actually, just a couple weeks ago. Just a couple weeks ago, a big Final Fantasy VI ROM hack came out, which actually got some traction on Reddit, I saw. This is Final Fantasy VI T Edition, I think is what it's called.
T Edition?
Yes,
Yeah.
this is a well-known Japanese ROM hack of the game.
It became translated into English.
Which just recently got translated into English. So, and like it's actually got two patches, because the second patch, it's one that you can patch in once you're at end game, and it basically creates a whole new post game for 6 nets.
Yeah, I see screenshots of them fighting Ultimecia and Cloud of Darkness on this page. That's impressive. Maybe I'll play that at some point in my life. I don't know when that's going to happen, but that'd be cool to do. We should do a Let's Play of Final Fantasy VI, but like modded in some crazy way. I want to fight Ultimecia with a chainsaw.
That sounds fun. Well, so Final Fantasy VI, the ROM hack community is huge, but with Final Fantasy V, the game we were talking about, they don't have as much of a big ROM hack community, but they do have a big challenge community where they say like, oh, you have to get through the game without this certain without these certain jobs, or you have to they just put on certain things where it's like you have to get through the game within these parameters or whatever. And the great thing about Final Fantasy V is there's so many weird abilities in it, and there's so many random ways to get through the game that you know, you can feasibly get through it with all these limitations in place, and it's just like you end up using abilities that you would think were completely and utterly useless. Like, I've been writing pages for these blue magic spells, and half the time I write a page and I think, when the fuck would you ever use this? Like, I was dead ass. I was trying to write the strategy section thinking, when would I ever use this? But the answer
Sorry,
is, I
can't use.
wouldn't.
There's like a lot of noise coming from your mic.
Yeah, sorry. I think I fixed it. Is that better?
I think so. We'll just say there's a frog that was joining us and has been croaking the entire time.
It was scary.
Yeah. So sorry, Techno. You were saying about the blue magic?
Yeah. So, like, because half the time when I was writing pages for blue magic spells, I was just thinking there was no way I would ever use this, and I would write on the page like, you should use this ability instead. But then I was thinking, like, you know, for certain challenges, those probably are useful. So that's one of the great things about Final Fantasy V is there's just 1,000,001 different ways to break that game open and, like, you know, and defeat all the different challenges it has to offer. And that's one of the reasons I think Final Fantasy V has endured, despite the fact that the story, like, you know, oh, here's another thing I noticed when I replayed the game. Like, so the story of the game, I always thought it was kind of just silly nonsense, and that's all it was. Is it was just a dumb story with dumb writing, and I still think it's a lot of silliness. Like, I still think it's extremely lighthearted. But what I also realized, like, and I may be dumb because I didn't realize this the first time, but I also realized is there's some huge environmental themes in this game.
Really?
Like, it's kind of, yeah, it's kind of like predates 7, which made the same theme. Because when you think about it, every time they get to a crystal, they're always like, oh, this crystal was fine. And then Sid built a machine to amplify the crystal.
Oh, yeah.
And because of the machine, the crystal can't handle it, so now the crystal exploded. And then at the very end, you fight... Right, and then at the very end, you fight a giant tree. So what it's kind of saying, yeah. So what it's kind of, it's like it's making a proper like environmental like point in a game from 1993 or so, which I think is pretty commendable.
This is something that Square and like Hironobu Sakaguchi were really into in the 90s, because you know you have Final Fantasy VII with its environmental themes, of course.
1992. 1992 is when it came out.
Yeah. The Spirits Within has a very big environmental Spirit of the Earth kind of thing. There's some babbling about it in Chrono Cross, which, if you could make any sense of it, I think was trying to say something about trying to protect the environment. And Terranigma, though that's an NX game. Never mind. Yeah, so you can find those themes in probably most of the Final Fantasy games somewhere baked in.
Yeah, it's just because I didn't like when I first played it. I literally just thought, oh, this is a stupid, silly, bland story that makes you laugh a couple times. Like the time when X-Death is like, ha ha, I disguised myself as a splinter to infiltrate your lair, and I kind of just thought it was just silliness. But now it's like, oh, it's silliness, but there's also a bit of a theme going on here.
It's kind of like an old, like, Matter of Britain kind of logic to how Final Fantasy V operates. It feels like something that would happen to, like, Lancelot, where Mordred might have disguised himself as a splinter and is broken into Camelot's gonna kill everybody now.
Yeah, the only thing with Final Fantasy V, the thing I still don't really like too much about the story is, like, with the exception of Gilgamesh, there's no real character development. No one really has a character arc, so to speak. And there aren't that many moments in it that are especially memorable. But, you know, it's a very fun game, and the reason you will replay it is to figure out the different ways to break it open with an extremely incredible job system. So, very good game. Pixel Remaster is definitely the way to play it now. So, highly recommend everyone check it out.
And remember, if there was no Final Fantasy V, we never would have gotten Bravely Default.
We never would have gotten Final Fantasy VI. Oh, do you know what? One last point before we move on from this game. One last point. I didn't realize how many things in Final Fantasy VII were inspired by 5. Like, you go through, like, all the different, like, because I've been writing all the blue magic spells, and I didn't realize how many, like, spells would show up in 5 and then show up in 7 and
Yeah,
never
yeah,
show
like-
up again.
Like White Wind,
Yeah.
Big Guard, I know are both in there. I think those are the
Yeah,
only
there's
spells I
one
ever
like
used,
those.
though. Trine, I think, is
Right,
in there
there's
too. Aqualung.
Yeah, Trine's not in there. But there's
Aqualung
ones
is,
like
though.
those. Yeah, Aqualung's in there. That's right. So there's ones like those that are like they started in 5 and then they carried on throughout the series after that. But then there are like random ones like Magic Hammer. The only spells that's ever the only games that's ever been in are 5 and 7 and 14 apparently. Oh, 11 as well.
Is that like an
It
old
was also
D&D
Magic
thing?
Hammer was also in 9.
Oh, okay.
Oh, it was in 9. That's right.
That sounds like an old
that was
D&D
in
thing.
9
I
as
gotta
well.
look that up. Magic Hammer.
White Wind reappears in 14 as one of Halicarnass's boss abilities, but I don't think we've really seen it in Final Fantasy games other than that in recent memory.
Mhm.
Pretty much every attack in the series has come back in Final Fantasy XIV at this
Okay, yeah,
point.
maybe that doesn't count.
Oh, I'm thinking of Magic Missile. That's what I'm thinking of. I never played D&D.
Pon's Chorus is a spell that's only been a blue magic spell in 5 and 7. It hasn't even. And in 7, it's called Frog Song. There's
Oh.
another one. Like it's just these are things that like they didn't even show up in 6 as like a lore for Strago. There's just all these things and all these enemies that would have shown up in 5 and then shown up in 7, and that would have been it. Like I didn't realize how many like gameplay cues 7 kind of took from 5, and that was like really interesting to me going back to this game.
Yeah, this is around the point in the series with 5, 6, and 7 where they tried to really... they had like an interesting focus where every character could kind of learn everything in the game. So you kind of end up with a party where everyone has roughly the same strategy, but they could all be jacks of all trades, which I kind of like. A lot of RPGs have moved away from that, try to balance things, so you force people to do certain things. But 5, 6, 7, and 8. 8, I think, was the last one to do this. Maybe 10, arguably, and 12, I guess.
10 gets to that point, but 10's weird because you start off, the characters have a very specific role, and then at the end of them they become a jack of all trades, where they can do what they want.
12 actually has evolved beyond this, where the new job system means that everyone can't do everything. But the original release did have it that way.
Yeah, the way they explain it with 12 is that originally they were expecting people to specialize a bit so that they'd get to the quickenings and espers as quickly as possible, but they found that people were just slowly filling out the entire board, so they decided, well, fuck it, we're going to give you a smaller board so you can actually get to the quickenings before endgame.
Right. I mean, yeah, it makes sense. It's like they didn't originally design it that way, but then they sort of had to give people the guardrails because that was how the developers had intended it, I guess. But yeah, I mean, 5 definitely like was hugely revolutionary for the series from a gameplay mechanics perspective. Like that's when they really started to be much more experimental with things. They decided to really like think outside the box, because when you look at 4, that's an extremely simplistic game in comparison. Like, with 4, it's literally just you level up and you learn a spell. It's just every character does a certain thing.
4 is, the way I'd put 4 is, like, it's extremely measured. Like, it's extremely controlled. They know exactly which characters you have and exactly what all the characters can do at all points. 3, of course, was more diverse than that. So 5 is, an evolution on 3.
Yeah, that's right. Like, 3 is when they started it, and 5 is when they dialed it up to 11.
Yeah. Do we have...
Yeah, and the style of...
Yeah, go.
The style of 4 did not return to the series until, like Final Fantasy IX, I'd say.
And even with 9, it's a much more like complex version than what happened with 4, because there's more to it where you have to I need to find the right equipment pieces to learn the right abilities. It's still much more involved than let me just level grind to have the right spell that I need.
Yeah, you won't be forced to use Tela for 12 hours in Final Fantasy IX. Thank God. Not a fan of Tela. I'm sorry. I know he's doing his best, but your best cannot be losing stats when you level up. I'm sorry, dude. It's just unacceptable. It's hard out here.
He was not a good character.
Sometimes we got to be real with old people, and you know what? You can't be on the front lines, dude. We should probably what should we do now? We should talk about some of the news, right?
Okay.
The news for the month of October. Let's look. What's our first?
That isn't the stuff we already looked at.
Yeah. A few things like that.
Let's start off with some news that a lot of us are not going to be very happy about, and I know I'm kind of annoyed by this, and I didn't even play this game. So Square Enix announced their earnings report, and they said Neo 2 underperformed. It's like, dude, you didn't market it. What do you expect? You just drop it out in the middle of nowhere. No one knows that it exists. And then you're like, oh, this game underperformed. We're never doing this again. It's like, what the fuck, dude?
Neo, The World Ends With You, specifically, is what it's underperformed. I played it, and I loved it. Everyone should play that game. It is available on Switch and PlayStation 5 and 4. Apparently, I'm the only one who knew it was on PlayStation, because I'm like the only person that bought it there. That game underperformed. They had a few excuses for why their sales were less this year. That's really what the main point of the earnings report was. This was a down year for them across a few things because, Final Fantasy VII didn't come out this year, and Final Fantasy XIV got delayed, I guess, beyond what they originally had planned, and also has been delayed another 2 weeks, so it's coming out December 7th. Sorry, just dropped that one in there.
3rd. It's out next week.
Sorry. I thought it was out Pearl Harbor Day. Sorry.
I mean, pretty much it's a MMO expansion, so it's pretty much all relying on pre-orders, which unlock a few days early.
Yeah, the actual release date is a total formality.
Yeah, the total sales last year were 1.5 billion. And this year seemed to be 1.49 billion. I guess that's their total revenue for the entire company of Square Enix.
That sounds about right. So
that's enormous, though. That's an insane amount of money. I had no idea they were making that much money was passing through this just one company. Jesus.
Well, that's probably I think a huge amount of that is going to come from the MMOs and the gacha games.
Yeah.
But in terms of sales of actual physical games, I don't want to say it's insignificant, but it's not it's not the reason why they're reaching 1.5 billion yen on its own.
No, it is quite a lot. This year, the sales. I'm going off a report on Anime News Network, though they're just quoting the report, so I'm guessing these stats are correct. The major releases this year sold 350 million versus last year, which was 513 million. So that'll be most of what the difference was. Smart devices were 551 million versus last year's 563 million, so that's not that different.
I gotta ask, how much of that was Guardians of the Galaxy?
How much of the sales? Probably not that many, considering this is a November report.
That's released too soon to be part of any earnings report.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I will say, from what I've seen in the earnings report, the last time that Square Enix's traditional single player game that category of games was able to compete in earnings with the online and mobile departments was the quarter when 7 Remake came out. That during that time it spiked to be I think even a bit better than online, which
no surprise.
Is kind of expected, really.
Yeah.
Then, of course, they managed to piss away the gross of that by how much of a fucking disaster Marvel's Avengers was.
Because I thought Guardians of the Galaxy I thought, considering what it was extremely good.
It's on sale
was
now.
kind of repetitive. Like the gameplay was alright, I guess, but Guardians, the writing of it, the storytelling, like that was much better than I expected it to be. Like,
did you play it?
I was extremely happy with it. Yeah, I did. I finished it.
Oh wow! All right.
Yeah, I thought it's really good. It's like everything you like or anything people like about the films is in this game, and like as far as the gameplay goes, it's like it's not bad. It gets a little repetitive later on, but you keep going for it just because the story's kind of fascinating and you want to see where that's going. So yeah, I thought it was extremely good. I was very happy with it.
I think the best-selling Guardians of the Galaxy still wasn't going to manage to hit what Final Fantasy VII Remake did, though.
Yeah, agreed. Like, and that's why it was kind of. I think it was like the problem is it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way when they had their big like event. I think it must have been E3 or something, and they said, "Oh, this is the Square Enix event," and then they spent all of their time on Guardians when it's like, all right, but people are here for Final Fantasy 16.
Yep.
Or for like one of your other Japanese games. They're not here for
no Neo The World Ends With You trailer in that show.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually, swinging back to the Neo The World Ends With You stuff, in a lot of like the post E3 stuff, a lot of that marketing stuff gotta say, well, what else could they do? Because the social media game, the social media coverage from Square Enix's accounts and stuff on there was actually pretty big, and it's influencer stuff down. Well, they were giving out a lot of streamer codes and such. But yeah, the main problem is that E3 felt like it was written by some IDOS guy who is offended at the very notion that the parent company still makes video games.
Well, I mean, we did get "We're Here to Kill Chaos."
That was pretty good.
I absolutely vehemently hate how excited I am for that game. It looks so incredibly stupid.
I'm shocked that you're excited for it.
It's so incredibly fucking melodramatic and stupid. But I'm so here for it.
So just so that people at home understand what's going on, we have a fifth person that's just randomly popping in, and I can't stop this from happening. They're just showing up. So that's Hex who just talked.
It's me. It's Hexed. I'm dropping in and out because I'm muted because I'm playing video games at the same time. So
maybe I'm playing Shin Megami Tensei 5 on mute. Who knows? You don't know what I'm doing with my hands right now.
Okay. I just want to make one last real quick point on Guardians before we go to the next news item. And that's just to say that like the dialogue system in this game is something that I really think the 7 Remake can actually learn a lot from, because this is like my ideal dialogue system in the game, where it's like you give the player a ton of choice that can affect a lot of outcomes, that can affect the way certain characters behave towards you and can change how the playthrough goes, but you don't like make it so that the character has no personality. So what I mean by that is, like, I feel like a lot of games, when they have a lot of dialogue choices and they give you choice, is like they kind of forget to give that character any development or personality towards them. Like, if you think of like Commander Shepard in like Mass Effect, for instance, Commander Shepard is not a character. Commander Shepard is just
he's a character avatar of what you are. Yeah.
It's not a character. But Star-Lord in Guardians of the Galaxy, Star-Lord is a character. At the same time, it's your Star-Lord, So when you, as the player, say, I'm siding with Gamora over Drax on this situation, and then you choosing to side with Gamora changes the whole way this next mission goes, and then it affects a mission later down the line, right? But it still feels like what Star-Lord says to Gamora is still something Star-Lord would say, and he still has a character arc in this game.
Yeah,
right?
this is something
But,
Witcher
like-
3 did very well with Geralt, where you could
Yeah,
roleplay, but
Witcher
you're still within the
3 is another
parameters
really
of
great-
Geralt.
Yeah, it's another really great example of that is Witcher 3. And I feel like Cloud in the original Final Fantasy VII kind of started this in a way, because you feel like the dialogue options they give you as Cloud are things that allow him to still have a character while still being your Cloud. So for instance, like if you go to Fort Condor as Tifa or Cid, then the Fort Condor people ask you like, oh, do you want to help out? Then Tifa or Cid, they won't give you a choice. They just say, oh, we're gonna help out Fort Condor, and then you do the mission anyway. When you go there as Cloud, you get the choice to say no, fuck off, or to say yes, I want to go there. And
Would
that's
Cloud say
because,
fuck off though?
Cloud, he doesn't. No, he says not interested.
Okay,
like,
all right.
Which is basically fuck off. But but you get the choice to say not interested when you're Cloud in that situation, because Cloud could say not interested, or he could say, all right, fine, let's help out. So I really hope the future parts for 7 Remake take a lot from Guardians in that respect, because did the dialogue think right, and I hope that they carry this on. Because I feel like 7 Remake, the first part we didn't get as much dialogue choice as we did the original game.
All right. So who did you take to Gold Saucer on your date? Did you get Rocket Raccoon or Drax?
Well, I chose to sell Groot instead of selling Rocket.
Okay.
But that's not really the same thing.
Let's get back, I guess, on topic-ish. Oh, crap, I lost the thing. Oh, now I remember what I wanted to talk about. NFTs. That was another thing that was in Square Enix's earning report.
Do we have to talk about NFTs?
I have to at least mention it, because they brought it up.
Just kill every single NFT, bro.
No, we cannot kill all of them, but we hopefully will one day live in a world that does not have NFTs again. We do not endorse the mass genocide of all the people that are into NFTs and crypto. And please do not ask me questions about my t-shirt that says I do not endorse genocide of NFT bros. Exactly.
Anyways, the NFT news, please.
Yes. My t-shirt answers all of the questions. Please stop asking me questions about genocide of NFT bros. So, that was there. Let's see.
I'm sorry, I need to catch my breath a little bit.
Let's see, what other news bits we had? Oh, I already mentioned that Final Fantasy XIV was delayed 2 weeks. It's a shame, whatever. Final Fantasy XV, which we'll get back to in a second, has hit 9.5 million copies and is now the 4th best-selling video game in the series. That's impressive.
Sorry, which one was that?
Final Fantasy XV, XV. The one with Noctis and other people, I guess.
I'm not terribly surprised by this. I just think 7 Remake, when it releases to other platforms, will probably surpass it.
Another weird bit of news is that there's a new manga coming out. Final Fantasy XIV spin-off manga series Academia Eorzea in Japan. It's about the
I saw that and I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah, they're making Boku no Hero Academia Final Fantasy XIV version for some reason.
It's about the school lives of Alphinaud, Alisace, and other Final Fantasy XIV characters. Am I pronouncing that right? I don't even know.
Alphinaud.
Oh, it's French. Okay, it's French.
Yes. Their backstory is they went to like magical Ultra Harvard, so it's not completely out of the realm of Crazy Town that Square Enix is coming out with this new manga.
This is done by.
This is probably.
Yep.
An alternate universe based on that one time they did this as an April Fool's joke.
Okay.
Although, if it is real, I do think we do finally deserve to see the story that has been told in Final Fantasy XIV about how Alpha No learnt art so he could pick up chicks.
Manga artist is Amachi Asura, which I don't think I'm pronouncing correctly either. I don't know if they've done other manga before. There is a sketch of these two characters who, frankly, look exactly the same to me, but one is dressed like a boy and one is dressed like a girl. So, have fun with those genders, you crazy kids. Yep. That's probably who they are. I don't know anything about Final Fantasy XIV except for there's a hot villain with a scythe now. So, that is very important that we cover that.
Xenos has a scythe now.
Yep, good for him. He also has a new costume, which looks awesome. Is that all the news? I feel like I'm missing something.
I think we did already mention that Endwalker got delayed to next week, so...
yeah, here we are. There's another data leak that happened. This is the Geforce Now Leak, which includes various... I'm guessing these are, like, placeholder release dates, but they are claims of when these things are coming out, so the claim is that Final Fantasy VII Remake is, or was at some point planned to come out on June 1st of 2022. Dragon Quest XII for January 1st, 2023. Final Fantasy XVI, March 1st, 2023. And this is the second time I think we've heard this. Final Fantasy Tactics Remaster, claimed for February 1st, 2022. So there is a lot of smoke around Final Fantasy Tactics Remaster. That might actually be a real thing.
I think it's a real thing. Like,
Yep.
I'm just going to be honest. I think it just makes way too much sense for them as a company to remaster that game. I think the same for Final Fantasy IX Remake. I think that's real. Like, and I'm excited for both of them. I think these are games that definitely need to be played by more people and put in front of more people. So,
Techno, did your mic get more quiet, or I don't know?
No, I was just further away from the mic. I can repeat that if you want.
No.
Away from the mic to breathe in.
You know what?
Anyway,
everyone knows what a friggin' Looney Tunes Helter Skelter piece of crap podcast this is. So you know what? Why even bother doing the audio editing at this point? You know what?
Yeah. So like, I don't believe Tactics Remaster exists. If it does, I'll be pleasantly surprised. But I also don't believe in anything. Like,
okay.
Yeah.
Well,
nihilism helps
Triangle
sometimes.
Strategy demo?
That's next year, I think, is still.
Yeah, the game's coming out next year, but like presumably people had thoughts on the demo, and if people really liked the demo, then it makes sense that Square Enix would try to capitalize that and be like, here, use a Tactics Remaster.
So there's Tactics Remaster, and the other one is War of the Visions, which is basically it's clearly trying very hard to be a Final Fantasy Tactics spiritual successor as a gacha game.
Yeah, there are a ton of indie Final Fantasy Tactics successors, including the Unsung Story Kickstarter, which I put $20 in 8 years ago and still have not gotten a video game out of. Maybe one day that'll come out, but who knows. But I feel like there's a new Final Fantasy Tactics remaster game every 6 months, like a new indie version of it.
Yeah. I think overall there is probably some kernel of truth in here somewhere, because it'd be really weird if NVIDIA made up a bunch of stuff about partners' IPs, just completely made that shit up. I assume the dates are a bit of bullshit, not only because a couple of the ones mentioned were blatant placeholders, and also with 16, we do expect a PC version to be happening eventually, just because, the initial reveal, they accidentally included also available in PC in the ad that was in the live stream version. But yeah, because Sony's got an exclusivity deal locked out on that, that's probably not until at least a year after the PlayStation 5 version releases.
Yeah. I hope Final Fantasy 16 comes out. My heart's getting broken slowly every month we go by with nothing to report.
I don't know, I don't know how you haven't gotten used to Square Enix taking so long to release games at this point. Because you've been a fan of theirs longer than I have.
Okay, I'm also a Denver Broncos fan, and this year I was not expecting a lot. But then, the first 3 games they won, and I'm like, oh god, this is it. All my pessimism, you gotta throw it away. And then with Final Fantasy 16, we get a trailer that looks like, hey, this thing's like done. Like this looks like a game. And then a year passes and there's nothing else, and the Broncos are now 5-6, and 5-6. And my heart just breaks too fast.
So now actually understand this sport now. Did you watch the Cowboys game yesterday?
No. I don't care at all about the Cowboys. I watched half of it.
Fair enough. We got very, very close. We didn't win. It was unfortunate.
Fuck the Cowboys. The Cowboys are frauds.
They lost the overtime.
Complete frauds. That's what they are. I actually watched the Bears-Lions game, and that kind of sapped my energy for football the entire day.
I have to support Cowboys. I'm a Texan.
No, you don't. You do not. You do not need to do that. You could do anything else.
Actually, I was contractually obligated when I came here that you have to support the Cowboys and you have to support the Spurs.
Okay, I live, within 5 miles of where the Jets and Giants play. I do not support either one of those teams.
Okay.
I've lived by them my entire life, and they both suck, and I don't want anything to do with them.
So anyway, back to Square Enix news. What's the next news item?
I think that was the last one. I don't think I have anything else.
All right, are we gonna roast Final Fantasy 15 now?
I guess we should. Let me just find out, when was Final Fantasy 15's exact 5-year anniversary? When did that game originally come out? I'm looking it up right now.
Something. I remember there was a huge thing about them changing the release date.
Final Fantasy 15's original release date was, I have it here, November 29th, 2016. So
I did say November 29th.
Yeah, sorry. So when this podcast comes out, it will actually be the 5-year anniversary of Final Fantasy 15. I might actually post it on that very day. So it's been 5 long, glorious years of Final Fantasy 15. It was, I think, the very first podcast episode we did, or the second one, where we were talking about our reactions to that game, and I believe everyone was pretty mixed, and I thought the game sucked.
It was. So it was literally like I embarrassingly took the side pro 15. Basically, it was this was how the podcast was back in those days. It was Skaith was the middleman, and he was like the one down the middle. You hated the thing,
yep,
and I was pro the thing. Right.
Didn't even finish it. Still haven't.
Yep. So basically, I was pro 15 back then, and in some ways, I think there's a respect about at least what the game was trying to accomplish, and there's still things that I look back on oh, that wasn't bad. But the thing is, since I've played that game, it's only slipped away from my memory. And that's a little worrying because I platinumed this game.
Wow,
I 100%ed this game.
Oh, man.
I did. I 100%ed this game, and I couldn't tell you anything about the story. I could barely tell you. All I can tell you about the whole game is the strategy I used to defeat the super boss.
Oh, the giant turtle guy.
Hold the attack button.
Yeah, it was hard. And when I fought the super boss, that's what it was. It was literally just find the way to make the boss be defeated as quickly as possible, because otherwise it's gonna take hours. And I managed to defeat it in about 20 minutes or so.
That's very impressive.
Yeah, I managed to defeat it in 20 minutes, But yeah, so that's the thing is I think I'll let someone else talk first before I go into it. But basically, I was happy with the game at the time, and now I barely remember it.
Yeah. Catuse, you want to give your thoughts?
Okay.
I mean, I have not played 15. I didn't know this was going to be a 15 podcast when I signed up for this. Okay.
I think I mentioned
Great.
it. I did it.
I mean, I wasn't reading the Penguins.
Okay, well, what's very important is now that the fullness of time has passed, at this point, the hot takes have all cooled, and the game has kind of hit a moment of where it might be in history. These things sort of solidify. So as a neutral and objective observer, what do you think of Final Fantasy 15 then?
How do I think it fits into history, the history of gaming and the history of media? To be honest, it seems like nobody really cares. I don't want to have like a super negative. It seems like nobody hates it.
Right.
It's not like Star Wars or some shit.
Right.
It doesn't have like a hate-them community, but it doesn't seem like it's really been as. It doesn't seem like it's like the Final Fantasy VII remake where people are just like talking about how amazing of an experience it was. I don't know. That's just what it seems like from the outside.
Right. I think I can mostly concur with that. Like, what I should say is it did have a hate-them community at the time.
It definitely did. It's just those people all got bored.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, whereas 13, like, I think 13's hate-them community lasted much longer than 15's did.
I'm still in there, baby. We could go on Final Fantasy 13 if you want to. Let's still feel that passion.
I mean, we could. I think we could compare them a little bit. I feel like with 15, like there were I vividly remember like a lot of people took a similar arc with 15 that I did, where like there are still plenty of like content creators who will have their reviews of 15 up, where you look at the time and they said, oh, 15 is great, I'm so happy with how it turned out and I had a lot of fun playing it, and then they'll release a video 2 or 3 years later and be like, actually this game kind of sucked, like actually I'm not happy with it at all, and like and the game does have a community of people that that enjoyed it at the time, still enjoy it to this day, and they still have things they like about it, and all power to you, because honestly, mate, like if you could find enjoyment in something, even if I didn't, all power to you. Like if you can find an enjoyment in something that I couldn't, then that's great for you. But what I feel like with 15 is I feel like a lot of people who said, oh, 15 and because there were people who would defend 15 by saying, oh, everyone just hates every new Final Fantasy that ever comes out. Like, they hated 13, they hated 12, they hated whatever. And 15 only gets unfair criticism because they hate the new ones and they're just too nostalgic for the old ones. And I just think that's completely the wrong take. And my reasoning for that is when 15 came out, like, it had a somewhat muted reaction where there were people who loved it and have either gone off it, or some people still love it. There were people who hated it and have gotten bored, as you said, have gotten bored of hating it. Whereas when 13 came out, there was article after article about how JRPGs are dead. And that just didn't happen with 15. Like, the reaction 13 got, 15 just didn't get that.
To be fair, I would not trust any gaming news sites' coverage of Japanese games in that era, because that was the collective era where every single games journalist had decided that they no longer liked Japan.
Right.
That was more of a 2010 era. I think that had kind of cooled by 2016.
Like,
2016 is going into the dark souls.
Like, I mean, the era of 13 and a lot of people hating it. There's also the era of that one very infamous Nier review with one, I think it was one of the McElroy brothers who did a review for Polygon, and it was basically, this game fucking sucks because I can't figure out where to do the fishing bit for this one story quest.
He just fished in the wrong
and
pond.
I believe the remake actually, the remake for modern consoles, actually, if you do try to fish in that spot repeatedly, the game will just go, fuck it, and give it to you anyway.
No. What actually, I did the exact thing that he did in the remake. I was fishing like 5 times. I'm like, why can't I find this fucking fish? So then I just looked it up. It's like, no, you got to walk over here. You got to go through the cave, and on that other beach, that's where you got to fish.
So very simply, I think Final Fantasy XV is the Fallout 4 of JRPGs.
Ooh, good comparison.
People love it on release, and then they just start to see all of the problems with it soon after.
So as someone who doesn't play WRPGs, do you mind elaborating for ignorant people like me?
Okay, so Fallout 4 was promised as very big, very ambitious, in true Bethesda fashion, showing off all these new systems, yada yada. You know the whole kind of deal.
Yeah.
And it basically just kind of fell flat in every single way possible. That's the kind of comparison I have. It's also a very interesting comparison because they came out at about the same time. I bought them literally in the same transaction, and I had the exact same reaction to both of them. So it's like a one-for-one comparison for me.
Yeah, I remember you played 15 and you just couldn't get into it at all after like 2 hours or so.
Yeah, like I tried playing it for like 2 or 3 hours and just could not get it. I just could not get it, like at all.
So I guess as the guy who is allegedly doing Final Fantasy Wiki plays Final Fantasy 15, I suppose I actually have to say something.
You do.
And yeah, part of it is, losing its luster over time, but overall there are some things to like in that game. And like I said at the beginning of that Let's Play, I like this game, but it's a mess. And like the sense of exploration, I still like the party member character interactions. Those are still really good. But like the story is barely there, and it's so unfinished that Tabata left and had to comprise the last 3 chapters of DLC into a book. The characters outside of the party and Arden are barely there.
Yep.
Like for instance, the death of what's her name, Luna. It's such a nothing moment. Like,
spoiler.
Right,
she's supposed to be.
She's
supposed to be one of the leads.
Right.
And you basically feel nothing about the fact that a large amount of the story is supposed to revolve around her, and that she dies trying to help Noctis attain his goals. Just the story is pretty crap. And the other thing is that the battle system is terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Like there is no sugarcoating that. There is no qualifiers there, because while it's normal for Final Fantasy to have a bunch of set dressings that you don't really need to interact with if you want to get through it, 15, the set dressings are so out of the way that you don't even need to pretend you can interact with them. Like, you don't even need to really know warp strikes exist to play the game. It is literally a matter of hold, I think it's circle, until someone does a parryable attack, and then you hold square for a second instead. It is that much of a nothing. And yeah, that's eventually going to be the big problem about it. This is a JRPG. Most of your time in the game is going to be in combat, and most of the time you're in combat, you're just holding down one button.
Yep.
It is in effect a nothing game.
Well, it's kind of worse than that, because the combat, like most JRPGs, what you're hitting is X and the D-pad is what it is. So it's like not mechanically intense. But in this game, there's not really like decisions that you make that are interesting at any level. It's not even as basic as pick a elemental defense and kind of break that. Go and throw fire at the ice enemy. In this game, it's just You kind of attack for a little while, then you got to go and teleport onto a thing, so then you can go restore your MP, then you can jump back in. It's like a very simple cycle, and you just do that over and over again, and every fight is the same. Every single fight is the same.
The only slightly involving part is when you have to gather the little things to put together your magic bomb, and then you use the magic bomb once in the fight, and then you're done.
I don't even know what you're referring to.
Very simply, Final Fantasy XV should have been Dragon's Dogma if it wanted its combat to be interesting or good. There's it's possible to make action JRPG combat feel like you're actually taking actions and doing stuff. And Square is actually quite good at this. Look at how good Kingdom Hearts is.
7 Remake.
I haven't played 7 Remake.
You gotta play 7 Remake or you're not allowed on the podcast ever again.
And 16 looks like it's just straight up trying to be Devil May Cry. So, yeah, that is the direction that... I mean, if they are going in an actiony direction, which, they are, that is kind of the direction that they have to go.
I feel like so the other thing we should mention about 15 that I don't think we brought up yet is the Final Fantasy 15 has changed significantly since it came out, where originally you could only play as Noctis, and now there are 3 people you can play as, right?
I think there's multiplayer now, isn't there?
There's multiplayer as well. I think it might have shut down by this point.
Oh, god damn it. Never mind then.
15
I haven't heard anything about it shutting down. So.
Oh, okay, so it's still going, so you can still play 15 comrades. But anyway, so
that did have single player compatibility anyway. So
215's credit, the 4 party members do play differently, right? They do feel differently when you play them. But most people at this point just say, well, why would I ever play Noctis when these other guys are way more interesting? Prompto has his different guns that you can use. Then Gladio has a few different combat moves with his sword. And then Ignis is a little bit closer to what you were describing, Blue, with the whole, you can charge his weapons, the elements for his weapons and stuff. And
I don't even know which one is which anymore. Which one of the 4 boys assigns to which.
Noctis is the main geezer.
I know.
Prompto is the blonde.
I'm kidding, actually.
Gladio is the massive guy.
Okay.
And, I was so disappointed, dude. Gladio was my favorite one, and they go, yo, we're gonna do his DLC, and he's gonna fight Gilgamesh. And I was like, oh my god, it's going to be my favorite part of the game. And then Gilgamesh was boring as fuck.
He was just like a ghost guy,
and the whole episode was the weakest one. It was the weakest one. I was so upset.
Your accent's coming back. You're so upset.
It doesn't even have 8 arms. Might be disappointing.
Yeah. You know what? I got to give my thoughts on this game, because it's starting to eat my chest.
Okay.
I feel it building like a balloon. I have to go and say what I need to say about this game.
Alright, go for it.
This feels like a game that was never finished. That's kind of my final thoughts on it. Even with all the work that went into it, and all the revisions and everything else, it feels like a game that's barely complete. And it feels like at some point, we know the development history, so we know that Tetsuya Nomura had some kind of vision for this thing, and it was impossible in some way, or he couldn't find it. He couldn't find the fun in the concept, so they pushed it on to Hajime Tabata, who I remember in early releases of this game, the demos, he would release it, and even when he released it, was like, I don't know what this is. Can you guys help me out? I need some fan feedback. Just try to help me find the fun in whatever this thing is. And they never found it. They just never did. The game is just depressingly dull. There's just nothing. Sorry, what?
I personally found the episode the Sky demo. I personally found that more fun than the main game.
Oh wow!
I agree. I feel like when they made that demo, I was like, oh okay, they're in early stages of this, and they have the potential to make it pretty good. And instead, they didn't really go much from there.
Yeah, that's
all,
that's what's so weird about it, because. Sorry, I have to keep going. I'm going to be a bully about this.
You go first.
What's so weird about that is, like, this is one of the things, like, one of the telltale issues I have with this game is the Duskgate demo, and I think the final version, the Behemoth quest, is the only quest in the game that feels, like, completed. It feels like there's
and that's the one from episode 2.
Yes, there's a beginning, middle, and end. There's a build-up. There's a structured story that the quest is telling. It leads to surprising moments and twists where the Behemoth shows up where you don't expect it, and you have a fight. And that feels like an authored, impressive, completed event, and nothing else in the game feels like that. You could play for 10 hours just driving around doing pointless nothing quests for nothing NPCs at these nothing towns where everything looks the same, and it's just like, it just felt like they had no idea other than, we have to make it big. It has to be massive. It has to be visually impressive and physically overwhelming in terms of size. And even then, despite how big the map is and how much shit there's in it, like, I played for maybe 12 hours, and I think I was 3/4 of the way through the game without even realizing it. It just is not up to par of what a Final Fantasy game should be, and it is depressing and uninteresting.
So I think SEM asked us something to say before I get to my next thing.
Right. Okay. So yeah, the Sky gameplay feeling better than the main game. So I mentioned earlier that a lot of don't even have to pretend that you're supposed to interact with them. The Sky, that's not actually the case. In the Sky, there are two big changes that I think that got dropped in the main game that I think made the game feel a lot better. The first is how weapons worked. So in the main game, you've got 4 weapon slots, and you press on the D-pad to change your weapon, and moveset is based entirely on what weapon you have equipped and such. In Episode to Sky, you only had one combo, but your combo was based on not only what weapons you had equipped, but in which order you had equipped them. So you had 5 weapon slots, and the auto combo would always start with the weapon that you had in the first slot, progress through the second, third, fourth, and on the 5th. And there's not much opportunity to do with it there in that demo, but it feels like a more engaging idea than what they ended up having. And the big one, in Episode of the Sky, weapons had skills that you could spend MP on and do shit with.
Wow, I never played this demo, but I'm getting upset hearing it because the final combat has so little choice to it.
I'm gonna bring up one other thing. I think this was my biggest disappointment with Final Fantasy 15, and I think this may be the reason why it didn't resonate with me anymore. The character I really liked, the only character I really liked, was Arden. I still think Arden is the best part of the game's writing. I think he's a tremendous villain. I think he gets plenty of great moments.
He's got a great hat.
I think Arden, he does have a great hat. But I think the worst part of this game, by far, characters are so underdeveloped, especially the female characters.
There's like one.
I feel like there's 3. There's Sydney, or Cindy, as she was translated over here, who gets basically nothing to do.
Nope.
Like Cindy just gets nothing. Other
wait,
than,
there's 4.
Here's this weird.
She grinds on a car.
I'm remembering now. Wait, no, there's 5. There's 5 female characters. There's Sydney, there's Stella. No, I'm sorry. There's Ludafreya. There's Ludafreya's butler, black-haired girl who turns out to be Shiva.
Yep.
There's one of the characters' little sisters, and there's Dragoon Lady.
It's Gladio's sister. That's correct. And Aranea, so everyone goes, oh, Aranea is the best part of the game, blah, 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 blah. And she's got a great design, and she's pretty cool in her little interactions. Now, where's the character development? Where's the backstory? Where's anything? There's nothing there, and they were gonna put it in this DLC episode that never released. They never released the DLC. So it's like, and the reason why it's so annoying and upsetting to me is because I mentioned earlier how they actually did a pretty decent job of making it so that the other playable characters all feel different, right? Do you know one of my favorite things about 7 Remake that has in spades and this game doesn't? Is that you have such a like completely different set of people that all feel and play different.
Yep.
And you know, there's such a great party dynamic going on there. And it's not that there's a bad dynamic going on with 15. You know, it's kind of cool because in some ways it does give you like a more nuanced viewpoint of masculinity, and it's cool that, you know, these guys get to hang out on their little right. But
dudes
then
being dudes.
The rest of yeah, like that part is all kind of cool, but that's all there is in the game. There's nothing else.
Yep.
Because the other female characters barely have anything to do, and they just don't do a great job with it. They don't give people development. They don't give people backstory, and that's why this game is so like, it's so upsetting to me, because when I look at things in the lore and when I look at things that they were trying to accomplish, I do feel like they could have made something really interesting and that would be really good. They didn't. They failed fundamentally, like just because of like whether I think it's because of all the development troubles. Maybe I think that's part of it. I think another part of it is just not very good direction. Like I think people were unclear on it. Like, you know, they just, I don't know, but they failed with the characterization. They failed with the characters, and you know, it's really upsetting that there's a few things we can point to in this game where they're like, oh, that's really good. Wish that was in a better game.
Yeah.
You know, it just kind of sucks.
So I guess our opinion has not changed in the last 5 years then, ultimately.
No, my opinion has done a total 180. Like, because I think, so when I did the original podcast, I've gone back and rewatched it. Like, my original take on this was that I was happy with it because I thought it was a good template for a game going forward, right? I thought it wasn't there yet. It wasn't what it should be, but it's a great thing that to build on it later. And I no longer think this. And the reason I no longer think that is just because I feel like it didn't matter how many extra years, extra development it got. You know, when you make decisions like, oh, we're only going to have this all-male cast of characters, and that's going to be the whole game is just that little road trip. You know, when you make decisions like that, and when you make decisions like, oh, the combat system is going to be this, and there's going to be no complexity other than, hey, here's a grenade you can throw once. You know, when you make decisions like that, it's you're kind of limiting yourself in how interesting you can make this game. Like, even if every single quest was like the episode Dusuke quest, which we've all agreed is the best one, even if every single side quest was like that, I just don't think it would be that compelling or that interesting of a game. Like, I don't feel like it would amount to anything that like approaches the level of a mainline Final Fantasy game. You know, I don't see how you get something that's as memorable as like 10 with that whole story, or as memorable as 12 with all its like you know, this fascinating gameplay mechanics and all the, like, you know, the political story that happened there. I don't see how you live up to that.
I would like to just say, like, making video games is extremely difficult. And a lot of times when you're trying something radically new, sometimes, you know, what seems like great ideas on paper just don't come together. And it becomes, in many ways, an unsolvable problem. And, you know, a lot of video games, they manage to overcome those issues. There's brilliant design that goes into them, and you'd never know that there were any difficulties at all. It just feels so natural. Like, it was the easiest thing in the world for you to go and make something like Final Fantasy, let's say, 10. Or, you know, Final Fantasy 14 in its newest form. You wouldn't even know that that game had so much trouble going into it. Even Final Fantasy 13, as much as, like, I personally have a lot of difficulties with it, it feels like a coherent, finished design on a certain level, and 15 just doesn't have that. It just feels like a game they were never able to solve the problem of. But they did their best, and they kept going years probably past the point they should have. And you know what? They sold a shit ton of copies, so it kept the series alive.
It did.
For them to keep making newer and better games, and they went on to, with Final Fantasy VII Remake, they solved many of the problems, as you said, that they had with 15. They were actually able to find a way to combine JRPG combat and, fast-paced action combat in great ways. I still don't love it, but they are actually able to solve problems I thought were unsolvable. But 15 just feels like a game that no one by the end wanted to make it anymore. And you could feel it in the gameplay and in the world design. The love was just not there. And that's upsetting.
So a quick point about 7 Remake is like I feel like, so I've definitely talked to a lot of people who have said to me like, oh, like 7 Remake feels like they took all the problems with 15 and fixed them. And I found that an interesting perspective, just because I feel like 7 Remake took things from a lot of different games in the series and like took them a little further. Like, and 15's one of them, but there's like 12 has some DNA there. There's some 10 DNA there. There's some 9 in there. There's and obviously the original 7. But like I feel like it took things from a ton of different games. So I don't know that I'd necessarily say that like 7 Remake is the product of them looking at 15 and saying how can we do better.
It feels like they were looking at Western open world type games and trying to make something at that scale.
That. I definitely agree with that. 15 is like the whole design philosophy in 15 was, let's take modern Western open world RPGs like The Witcher and try and make our own version of that with a Final Fantasy spin on it. And ultimately they made something extremely underwhelming that like any game company could have made.
Yep.
So it was a bit unfortunate how it turned out, really. I understand their design philosophy behind it. I just don't feel like it was the correct philosophy in hindsight at all. Like, I felt, I understand the thinking was, oh, we need to get with the times, but really, 7 Remake had the right idea where it was like, yeah, we can get with the times, but we can't forget what made this series what it was.
Well, the one difference is that Final Fantasy VII Remake is made by the same people who have been running this series for 25 years, and 15 is originally a Nomura, then it becomes a Hajime Tabata project, and he just didn't have it.
Some decent Final Fantasy.
I feel terrible for Tabata, considering this was his big, like, it ultimately became his legacy on the series, and it was a game he didn't really want to make. It was one he was kind of saddled with, and we never really got to get the true Hajime Tabata Final Fantasy game. He just never got his chance to make it. We got Type 0 and we got 15.
Well, he also made Crisis Core. Like,
who gives a fuck about Crisis Core? Piece of shit game.
A Crisis, or as Blue has just demonstrated, Crisis Core is divisive, but it has plenty of people that really love that game. And Type 0, I feel
fools. It's a boring, terrible game.
But so Type 0 is a game that I feel like, it's not for me personally, but like Type 0 has its own little identity and it's its own little thing, and it gets to be its own product, whereas 15 is like kind of a mishmash of like a bunch of different ideas. It didn't necessarily gel that well together. But what I will say for 15 is like as my like closing thoughts on 15 and what impact, if any, it had on the series. Because I think the TLDR for what I think of what impact it had on the series was very little. Actually, I don't think it had a huge amount of impact. I think the lesson Square Enix took from that was, let's try not to do that again. That was my impression of it. But what I will say is like I don't like to say that I hate any of these games, because I think if you look at them as far as video games are, I don't think any of the worst these have ever been, aside from, let's leave 14 a War aside, because that was an abomination. 14 before
1.0.
14 1.0, that was just an abomination, right? But I think when you look at all the mainline Final Fantasy games, none of them are bad. And I can sympathize with people who do still have a soft spot for 15 and do still like it, because there are things in the game to like, and I understand why, why it would resonate with a lot of people, So I think it had good ideas in it. I wish they were executed better. I wish it was in a better product overall, But I think it's just disappointing that it turned out the way that it did, because I think it had the potential to be so much better. But when you look at it as far as its legacy with the rest of the series goes, I don't think it had as much of a damaging impact as 13 did. And when I say damaging, I don't mean damaging to the franchise so much, because I don't have any ill will towards 13. I mean, like my assessment is that 13 really hurt the brand in terms of it hurt the discourse amongst fans, because so many people hated that game and there was just so much backlash towards it, and then the people who loved it were so vicious towards the people that hated it, and it was a whole thing. It was just a huge mess.
I think it's the only time that we've had admins sent death threats over their opinion of a Final Fantasy game.
Yep.
Multiple times for me.
We've definitely received death threats from Vanguard, including me, who is probably the Final Fantasy 13 fan of the admin team, mostly because I do still think that the story is kind of dumb.
Yeah, I am a very big loudmouth idiot that just says stupid things like Crisis Core is trash. But everyone else, they're very chill people that work on this wiki, and it wasn't just me who was getting death threats, it was everybody here, which is just fucking insane. Like, right. I'm the one that says that Final Fantasy 13 should burn, but, that's just me because I like to say things because I like to get reactions out of people. But come on, guys, relax. We did our best with 13.
That one time they went onto the fandom community central forums and claimed I was stalking them. That was funny.
Yeah.
So anyway, I feel like 15 didn't have the impact, the negative impact the 13 did. Even though, when I measure the two games up against each other, would I say 15 or 13 was a better game? I don't know. So when I like to put 15 in the same category with with Final Fantasy VIII in a way. Final Fantasy VIII is a game that has people that passionately love it and people that passionately despise it. But I feel like, now that things have cooled down, and it's been a long time since 8 released, but things have cooled down since then, and now we have a clearer head. So I think we can look at these two games, Final Fantasy VIII and 15, and we can say, there's some good ideas in there. And I can see why some of these things would really resonate with people. I can see why someone would really enjoy this game, or why someone would not enjoy this game. But ultimately, I think the best thing the series can do is learn from what it did well and learn from its mistakes and move forward with that. And there's things we can learn from 15, like what not to do and what to do, and there's things that we can. There's things we can learn from 8 as well. So I think the correct way to look at 15 is, it had good ideas, it had some bad ideas. We're just
cycling back and forth on the same thoughts now. I think we've kind of just all.
Very simply, I think Final Fantasy VIII is a great game because it gave us Eden's Gate in Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers.
Okay.
Because it is the best. It is the best series of raids in the game, just because it is the absolutely gayest. And that's
we might have to keep. I thought we were wrapping up, but now we might need another 10 minutes. I'm going to need you to.
Probably a more interesting topic than
I'm going to need you to explain what the hell is going on now.
No. Let's wrap. Okay.
Do you want to do this off mic?
Let's wrap up on this.
Just one more thing. My ultimate feeling on Final Fantasy 15, funnily enough, is that it makes me excited for the future of Kingdom Hearts.
Yes!
Because Nomura once said anything that he couldn't get into Final Fantasy Versus 13, he's going to put into the Kingdom Hearts series. And Kingdom Hearts 3 has proven that he's going to make good on that threat. We are going to get pure, unfiltered Nomura, inject that shit straight into my veins.
Yep.
That's great.
That's what I want.
That's a great way of looking at it.
Yeah, that's the problem with 15 ultimately, is that it is not pure, unfiltered anything. It is the least essential Final Fantasy game, and you know what? I'm not sure. Yeah, we're just going over it over again. Does anyone else have anything new and exciting?
Amazing. The reason why Eden's Gate is amazing is because it's pure unadulterated Nomura. Anyways.
Yeah. I guess we should wrap up then.
Let's fucking go.
Let's fucking go.
Finish it.
All right, let's fucking finish it. All right, podcast is over. I need Hex to tell me what the hell he's going on about with this.
How long has this recording even been going for?
We're on an hour 40. We need to wrap this up.
Let's wrap it up, guys.
Okay. All right. So let's have our
podcast, the movie.
Yes. So let's final thoughts, like final things to say. Thank you so much for listening. We are the Final Fantasy Podcast, Final Fantasy Wiki Podcast. Our URL again is finalfantasy.fandom.com. This podcast is hosted by me. My name is really Eric Fuchs, and I produce it, and I kind of do everything, I guess. Our audio is done. I mean, our opening and closing music is La Montañas de los Caballos Jovenes, which is Mount Koltz from Final Fantasy VI, which is from XPRTNovice off the Balance and Ruin OC Remix. Thank you so much for letting us use that music. And I will now end us on a quote from the Final Fantasy series. Enough expository banter. Now we fight like men. And ladies who dress like men. For Gilgamesh, it's morphing time!